All right, welcome everybody. I just decided to do a random stream. Just been working a lot and I'm tired and I need a little break. So I'm taking a break by doing a stream. I could take a break by doing something healthy and productive that benefits my life in some way. And no, got to work on building up that viewer count, building up those subscribers, get the work done, right? So you'll see here, I'm already sharing a video, kind of like Meta Monday. I was thinking of looking at this Craig Biddle response. So he did a response to questions after he had a discussion with Alex O'Connor. I don't know if you all saw I was a guest on Truth Over Tea earlier in the week, and I reviewed a discussion between Alex O'Connor and Craig Biddle. Oh, wow, randomly coughing right at the start of the stream. Excuse me. So they had a discussion ostensibly supposed to be about meta-ethics, but it ended up really being a discussion where Alex was pressing Biddle on his moral views. And it, to me, looked like it shifted a lot more towards normative ethics. And I could just say as a general commentary, I think it's cool that Alex is defending a non-cognitivist position. I don't endorse non-cognitivism. I find it a little strange he's defending emotivism in particular, because it's a rather, like, I don't mean this in it's a bit crude of a position. I feel like you could develop more. And I'm not one that's going to go in for quasi-realism and a lot of the sort of like fancy views, or like, well, we have this deflationary view of truth, and we have this view about this thing, we have this view about that thing, where they have a lot of, I guess you could say, well, like working parts. There's a lot of components to contemporary, I guess you could say, neo-expressivist views. And Alex goes in for a rather straightforward one that hasn't held up well, over the past century or so. I don't know of anybody in academia that says they're an emotivist. I mean, there might be a few. But again, that's not to say that's wrong. Like, I like when people hold dissident views. But I think where I'm a little disappointed isn't in that he endorses emotivism, but that he usually ends up spending whatever time he spends discussing emotivism just explaining what it is, rather than defending it, presenting arguments for it, motivating it, presenting reasons why one would want to be an emotivist. Ooh, yeah, that's a compelling position to hold. He doesn't seem to do much on that front. And maybe that is just because a lot of people just seem to need to know what it is, and not too many people seem to give the sort of conventional pushback you would get in the academic literature. In that case, I would just say maybe Alex needs to talk to meta-ethicists that are going to be like, whoa, I think there's problems with emotivism. Here are some of those problems. And there'd be plenty of people with the knowledge to do that. And I don't like presenting that view and then just not presenting any arguments for it. Still strikes me as a little strange. So I hope Alex will dig a little deeper into meta-ethics, or maybe he has and he's just not presenting it. I really don't know. I'm all about meta-ethics. I want to hear more of it. I want to hear, like, why is he an emotivist? Does he think there's good arguments for it? What does he think the good arguments are? How would he respond to the standard sorts of objections? I want to hear what he says about, like, Frege and Keach and, like embedding and the standard sort of semantic objections that you would see from people that would raise those sorts of objections. They're just straightforward, like intuitive, like, hey, it seems to violate my intuitions. It would seem to be the view that it's not the case, that it's true, that like torturing babies for fun is wrong. And that seems intuitively implausible. I would go all over the place with responding to that sort of objection. I don't think it's a good objection, but it doesn't come up. And then Craig responded by really, and maybe this is just where the conversation naturally, it was inevitable for it was fate for it to end up there. But they ended up just arguing about, like, the normative moral views that I didn't really see a meta-ethical clash, and I found that a little frustrating. So Craig is apparently responding to questions here. I think I might have listened to parts of this, but I don't even remember maybe I'll remember when I hear it, like I'll be like, oh yeah, now I remember that. But at the moment, I can't recall any specific questions that were asked here. So thinking of having a look at these. Okay, let's see what people have to say, because we got people here. I'm also happy to, because this is way more casual. I used to do these on Saturday. Those are the good old days, back when the channel was fresh and new. So if you have questions, I'm happy to stop anything. I'm not just going to go on this. This was just like a loose plan, like have a look at this video. But if people want to talk to me, I'm happy to do that instead. So, okay, let's see what people have to say. Miko says, yo, Sir Lancelot. Yeah, my mom used to call me Lancelot. Jimothy says Alex is a bit of a simpleton. I don't think I would say that. Maybe Alex, because Alex, I think maybe hasn't looked into metaethics as much as I have, but there's lots of topics I haven't looked into. If you started talking to me about philosophy of religion stuff, like I was talking to Danny or a variety of other people, you might go, wow, Lance, sounds like a simpleton. There's a big difference between ignorance and not having the chops to handle an issue. One thing I have given Alex credit for in previous interviews and in this one is that he's really good at knowing where to keep the dial to where he's pressing someone just enough where he's not being too aggressive or making them uncomfortable or defensive, but he's also not being too passive and too unwilling to press them. And he does it with a politeness that I think is very hard to match. So he's very good at keeping people in the sort of feet to the fire Goldilocks zone. He keeps their feet warm. He's good at keeping people's feet warm. They're not, he doesn't stick your foot straight into the burning flames, but he also doesn't keep it cold over in the corner. And I don't have that. I don't know how to, I don't have the ability in real time. I don't have the sort of ability to process all the information to monitor the social situation that I'm in and regulate where I like dial it up, dial it back. It's very hard for me to do. I dial it up or down based on like my mood. I'm tired, I dial it down. I'm pumped up and it's 2 p.m. and I'm full of caffeine. I dial it up and I might be more aggressive verbally. I might be super like excessively enthusiastic. So it's like I'm like a baby. Like my mood is just, did I sleep recently? Did I have a meal already? No, I'm kind of grumpy. Whereas Alex seems to have really good, I want to say like interpersonal self-control. So that is part of that is maybe talent. Part of that is a skill that's developed because I think Alex has improved that skill over the years and can handle people in situations really, really well. So I don't agree with that assessment. I mean, I'm sure people have critical things to say about Alex, but I'm very critical all the time. But when I see something I admire, even if there are places where I would be critical of somebody, like, do I think Alex does a good job presenting an anti-realist perspective? Honestly, no, not really. I think he has a ton of room for improvement. Like way, like I would give him like a C on that, a D maybe. Like he doesn't get a good grade with me. He would be happy with the grade in my meta ethics class, but in the talking to volatile and high profile people in a way where he doesn't completely piss them off, or if they get pissed off, it's entirely their fault. He does good at that. And having conversations with people where he's able to press them and reveal potential weaknesses in their position without them becoming super defensive or closing up, I think he's great at that. So, hey, if I'm going to say something positive about somebody, let me do it. I never say anything positive. Oh, that's what you say. I meant that in the most charitable way possible. I don't know how charitable that remark could be. I got a hello, hey. What else do we got? Yeah, more recent versions of non-cognitivism answer the Frank each problem. Yeah, and I don't know specifically how a lot of the sort of neo-expressivist views do. I mean, they can do so by doing some really fancy stuff with the way that they handle truth and language, to where they're straddling the line with whether they're like, is it non-cognitivism or not? Like, they don't really have a problem with saying things are true. So a lot of them, I think, end up, part of the reason I don't find those positions appealing is because many of them seem to tacitly concede ground to realists in the sense that they're like, well, we don't get the things we want out of a realist semantics, so let's do our best to come up with a position that lets us get the things we want. It's too conciliatory. And I don't see any reason to be conciliatory to realists. I don't think they're accurately capturing any definitive or important features of the way ordinary people speak or think. So I don't see any reason to concede ground to them. Now, if they want to drop correspondence theory of truth or other sorts of stuff, I might want to drop those for independent reasons. And then these views might end up looking they might end up looking comparatively less unappealing than other anti-realist views. but I'm not inclined to go in for them myself. But yeah, I think a non-cognitivist, maybe they could get around this by saying that a lot of this could be handled by pragmatics, not semantics, and that they really have problems with the way that conventional analytic philosophy handles language in the first place. That's where I would want to take things, but then I probably wouldn't end up being a non-cognitivist, at least not in any sort of traditional sense. I don't know. Not giving arguments is Giga Chad. No, it's not. Yeah, so yeah, Alex seems to be a good interviewer. Yeah, so Alex is a way better interviewer than I would be if I was doing interviews. Well, I guess I've done interviews, but you know what I mean. Is Lance independent a play on stance independent? Yes. Yeah, see, this is what I had in mind when I said it would be entirely someone else's fault if they stormed off. Alex is a good interview. That's why Peter Hitchens storming out was absurd. Peter Hitchens flipping out there was ridiculous. I mean, to the point of he came off to me as petulant and childish and ridiculous, just belligerent for no good reason. Like looking for a problem, thinking Alex was trying to, I don't know, if like get him with gotcha questions or something like that. Alex was doing something very standard that someone did. Like he was trying to say, hey, it looks like there might be a tension or inconsistency here or a double standard in your perspective. And Hitchens just took it entirely the wrong way, had a horrible reaction, and I was embarrassed for him and for, I don't know, I guess people that think he's good at that sort of thing. It was just real bad, and I thought Alex handled it about as well as somebody reasonably could have. I don't know what I would have done in this. I don't think I've been in a situation like that. I don't know if I would have been calm or I would have started shouting at the person. I don't know. Uh, I'd be down to try having those kind of conversations, but I don't know what would happen. When you say watched his talk with Alex earlier today, the Craig Biddle one or the Peter Hitchens one or some other talk? Well, I guess I'll wait to hear back from you. Ah, okay, cool. Yeah, so yeah, Craig, you said. Did you see my review of that on Truth Over Tea? Let me give you a link to that. I'll just post it in the chat. I also posted in my community section, so you could definitely go check that out. All right. Here it is. Oh, and I guess I could pin that. Oh, it's not coming up. There it is. Oh no, it's not letting me do what I want with it. One second. Let me hop over to YouTube and then I'll pin that up there. But yeah, check that out. I thought it went pretty well. There we go. All right. So yeah, do check that out. Consider subscribing to the channel. Consider, do all the things. Go go give it some views, give it some love. You can even throw some comments over there. I saw it didn't have a ton of comments. So if you have thoughts on my review of that video, oh, and I guess I could just say, because so much of it covered normative ethics, you'll see me commenting on stuff other than meta ethics. So if you're looking for Lance's commentary on something other than meta ethics for once, you could find a bit of that. Oh, another thing I should mention. Also, I really didn't forget that I still have this massive backlog of TikTok videos. I have a couple interviews and stuff that I did that I haven't posted. They'll get there. They'll get there. I'm just getting back, after a summer of chaos, which I guess I'll talk more about. It's when something gets in the distance, like if you haven't answered an email for one day, you can answer it the next day, no problem. But if you haven't answered for 2 weeks, it's real weird to answer it. So when I'm sitting on videos that are back from like March and April and May, it just feels super weird to just sit down and try to get them out there. But I will. They're not going anywhere. They're backed up. They're saved. All that stuff. Despite my computer dying, I got backups. So they'll be up eventually. I guess I should just post them. Another reason I was dragging my feet is because I felt like I had to re-listen to them and then do timestamps for where people are at in the videos. I could outsource that to people if they want to just listen. Because if you're planning on listening to the whole thing, and then I go from talking to one person to another, you could just drop in the timestamp and take care of it. It's a lot of work for me to re-listen to. Whatever. I just there's so much work, so much opportunity costs, and I could just do another stream. But I thought maybe I just put them up there without the timestamps, and then there just won't be timestamps. I don't know. I don't want to, because if it's like, no, you should really have timestamps. Okay, but when am I going to make the time to do it? I don't know when I'm going to do it. So maybe I should take this off of here until I'm going to get to it. Yeah. So I'll put that back up when I'm ready to look at it. But yeah, I got how many TikTok videos do I have? I don't remember. I'm not going to pull the folder open now, but probably 6 or 8 or 10 maybe. And some of them are 1 or 2 hours. So it's like 10, 12 hours. And it's very different. It's a very different format. I talk to totally different people there. People like sort of come up on stage and I talk to them. And I talk about meta ethics, free will, and maybe a couple other topics come up. Wow, I must be tired. I have like my eyes are like droopy and red. Ugh, it's a lot of work today. Yeah, Grant says, yeah, I hadn't seen you had watched it. Yeah, and I didn't just watch the Craig and Alex thing. I did like a whole commentary on it. Yeah, see, someone wants to see some non-meta ethics content. It exists. Should release 1 or 2 a week. Yeah, I'm thinking of just 1 a week and probably like further from Monday because that's when I typically do the streams. So maybe Thursday or Friday. I haven't really done research on what the best time to release a video is. Is it the morning, the evening? I have no idea. I don't know. All right. Any questions or things people want to ask me about? Oh, another thing I'll mention is I just recorded a video to post AMA comments. You know, like Kane B does it, where it's just like a short, like 1 or 2 minute video. Of course, I think mine's 3 minutes. Where I'm like, hey, ask me questions, and then you just throw your questions in those comments. Don't put those questions here because I'm not going to look here for the questions. But I will be posting that soon. So if you're thinking about questions, so I'm going to try to do an AMA. I've been reluctant to do one, but I gotta change things up here. We gotta do it. So just, yeah, feel free to ask whatever you want. Just no guarantee I'm gonna answer it. If it's like a ridiculous personal question or something like that, maybe I'm not gonna answer it. Or if it's about stuff like what's your view on, I don't know, Thomistic something or other, like, and I don't know anything about it, then I don't know, and I won't be able to address it. So, but feel free to ask whatever you want, as long as it's not rude or obnoxious. But again, save those comments for when I post that. I'll post it as soon as I can. The best time to release a TikTok is when the algorithm gods bless you. Is there any specific content to that, or is that just you being silly? Okay, maybe let's have a look at the Craig video. Let's see. I tried to get to a point where he starts to address a question. So I'll be addressing this, but if you have stuff to say in the chat that's not about this, that's totally fine.
Okay, let's start with this one. Why do you oppose using a metaphysically impossible hypothetical example to establish a moral principle or standard? So the important phrase in here is metaphysically impossible, because I'm certainly not against hypothetical examples. I use hypothetical examples all the time. I mean, so, in a book I wrote, you have a hypothetical example. Suppose someone robs a bank and he gets away to the islands with the money. That's hypothetical. It's, if this happens, then what are we going to think about it? Or what's the consequence here? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. My problem during the debate with Alex was that he was using metaphysically impossible hypotheticals, or hypotheticals that completely changed the nature of human beings, such that we're not talking about human beings anymore. So one of them.
So an initial concern with that is changing the nature of human beings in a hypothetical. Why would we say that that's metaphysically impossible? Like, unless you have a very specific view of the nature of human beings, where they have there's certain features of their nature that are, what would you say, metaphysically necessary? Like, this just is what it is to be a human. I don't even, is that what he's implying, or is he misusing the notion of metaphysical possibility? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why you couldn't have a hypothetical where you change human nature. Like, what if all people, I don't know, all people were psychopaths, or all people lacked empathy, or all people had no desire for love or friendship. They only cared about, you know, maximizing the amount of bananas in the universe. I I don't see any reason why you couldn't. Maybe those wouldn't be useful hypotheticals to entertain for any particular philosophical purpose, but I don't see what the point in just saying, yeah, I'm not going to engage with those, or I object to engaging with those. That coming up with hypotheticals that alter human nature, I don't see a problem with that in principle, as long as it's serving the philosophical end to which you're putting it. Doesn't seem like an issue. But let's see where he takes it.
Was suppose people couldn't die. Well, if people couldn't die at all, like
Yeah, see, how is that metaphysically impossible? Like, that doesn't, that seems totally possible to me in pretty much every like sense of possibility that one might ordinarily go with. Like, I don't. It's not like it's not like nomologically impossible either. It's not like you couldn't actually have a world in which people are, well, maybe if one means like literally people somehow avoid like the heat death of the universe or something like that. But even that I'm not sure of. But in terms of someone being something like practically immortal, or living for billions of years, or not dying of natural causes, there are ways of where like technology could just achieve ends like that. And that doesn't, you know, maybe he's thinking of this in very strict and literal terms, but I don't see a huge issue with asking a question like, suppose people lived more or less indefinitely, or were functionally immortal. I don't see why that would be outside the bounds of reasonable consideration for any standard dispute you might plausibly have in metaethics or normative ethics.
you couldn't even die if you wanted to die, right? You would not be a human being anymore. You'd be some other kind of animal.
See, that's a little strange too. Why would you not be a human being if you couldn't die? What exactly does that mean? Like, you could stipulate that by a human being, I just mean a being that is capable of dying, or will die. And so if you don't meet those conditions, you're not a human being. I don't know what work being really picky about the definition of a human being achieves. Okay, then what if we weren't human beings? Like, what we were, you could call us, you know, what schmooman schmeings, like, or schmooman beings. Maybe beings isn't that important. We're not humans anymore. We're schmoomans. So what? Okay, now what? Now what? So what if we weren't humans? We were schmoomans. Like, what? He can't entertain that. That's not. It's no longer morally relevant. I don't see why this focus on definition just strikes me as very strange.
And I'm not sure exactly what you'd be, but you wouldn't be a human being. So,
okay, so what?
The reason I oppose that kind of a hypothetical for trying to figure out how to think about morality or arrive at conclusions, much less arrive at any kind of a standard about what moral principles should be. It doesn't make any sense to use an example like that. It says, in effect, instead of dealing with reality, let's deal with non-reality and try to figure out.
Yeah, so that's not what a thought experiment is doing. Thought experiments aren't intended to say, hey, instead of dealing with reality, let's deal with something that's not reality. Typically, when a thought experiment says, hey, hypothetically, suppose this was the case, what would you do under these conditions? The purpose of thought experiments in these circumstances is typically to isolate potentially confounding considerations that do appear in the real world, so that one can isolate specific considerations and consider them in exclusion of, or holding other things constant, so that one can say, okay, when we narrow everything down, when we set aside potentially confounding considerations and we focus on just this dichotomous choice between this consideration or that consideration, would you favor this one or that one? Or would you make this decision or that decision? Or would you favor this view over that view? There's a good reason to use the term experiment in thought experiment. You know, we sometimes people might call them hypotheticals, but in a thought experiment, you know, imagine in the real world, I wanted to test whether a new medication can prevent pain, or can help people, I don't know, improve their mood. If you wanted to test that effectively, you would have to control for all the other things that a person did that would reduce pain or help them improve their mood or whatever. And so you wouldn't just have people enter a study and then you just continue taking antidepressants or continue taking painkillers or continue the same amount of exercise and you don't monitor or track that. Why? Because the whole point of an experiment is, in the real world, there's all these variables influencing you, and it's very hard to determine causality, like which of these things are causing outcomes or the interaction of these things versus which aren't, because you can't isolate a particular variable and consider it in exclusion to the rest. So the whole point of doing an experiment is to intentionally set up an artificial situation. In other words, an experiment only works if it's unrealistic and it's not like the real world. That's the whole damn point. That's how medical experiments work. That's how scientific experiments work. More generally, you create artificial conditions on purpose. That's the purpose of a scientific experiment. It's intentionally artificial. You see, in order to hold those other variables constant, so that that you can factor those out when you consider only the causal variable, the variable you're interested in, right? So you have your control condition, just as a very simple experiment for the pain scenario. Hey, does this medication reduce pain? You take people, put them in two conditions, give one group a placebo, like something that isn't supposed to do anything to pain, at least not like directly. Maybe there's a placebo effect. So you give one group, sugar pills or whatever it is. And then the other group, you give the painkiller you're testing, and then you would not have them take a bunch of Tylenol and all these other sorts of things. And then you try to hold as many variables constant. You don't want everybody doing wildly different things as one another. So you might monitor them under conditions in the lab for a few hours, something like that, right? And so you would then look at, okay, well, compare one group to the other. Was there an average reduction in pain reported by one group relative to the other? And that allows you to control those variables in a very artificial way. So a thought experiment is kind of doing something like that. So it sometimes is very difficult to say, hey, well, in the real world, considering all these variables, what would you do? Well, which of those variables is relevant to what you would end up doing? So when you create an intentionally contrived scenario, the whole point of making it weird or artificial or not like the real world is to intentionally distance yourself from all of the considerations that you don't want to be salient and in other words, relevant and potentially influencing the way a person judges one way or another to when they make that decision. I'll give an example. Consider the standard switch problem in the trolley problem. So you have a train headed down the tracks. It's going to hit 5 people. It will kill those 5 people if it hits them. You're standing there. There's a switch. If you pull the switch, it'll divert the train onto a side track where it will hit 1 person instead of 5. Is this a useful thought experiment? Yes. Is it perfect? No. Does it have problems? Yeah, probably. But consider the things someone might say if this was supposed to be a real world scenario. Well, they might say, well, I would jump in front of the train myself and then stop it. And then I'm sacrificing myself instead of letting a random innocent person die. I'm even more heroic than just pulling the switch. What do people that are giving this thought experiment say? They say, you can't do that. Why? Why do they say you can't do that? Well, because the whole point of this is to break the choice options available to you down to 2 choices. Pull the switch, don't pull the switch. Let the 5 people die, or pull the switch and divert it and cause 1 person to die. It's supposed to be a dichotomous choice between those to see if you think pulling the switch is morally permissible or not. And that's supposed to sort of give insight into your underlying normative moral views, what moral principles might be influencing you. In conjunction with the footbridge dilemma, would you push a person with like a large backpack or something off of a bridge, which will kill them, and then their body will stop the train from hitting 5 people? And you might notice that a asymmetry there where most people are willing to pull the switch, but they're not willing to push the person off the bridge. And then you might infer something like, what's underlying this is, an unwillingness to use people as a means to an end. So your people might be abiding by the principle that it's okay to let 1 person die instead of 5 people, but it's not okay to actively kill 1 person in order to save 5 people. So that might be the underlying normative moral principle that you gain insight into by exploring these 2 thought experiments in conjunction with one another. Now, what do people say in these scenarios? They often will say stuff like, oh, come on, if you pushed a person off a bridge, you don't know for sure that they're going to die. So now that person's going to have a horrible pain. They're going to be laying there in agony and pain while they're waiting for the train. And then you're amplifying the terror and the pain and the horror. Or they might say, how do I even know it's going to stop the train? Wait, well, how many people are on the train? There's at least a conductor on the train. What if there's other people on the train? What if I knock the train off the rails by doing that? I kill a whole bunch of people. What if it plows into a residential building or a school? I don't want to interfere. I can harm a lot of other people. Well, when you're presenting the thought experiment, you end up having to say things like, no, but that's not going to happen. There's no schools around. Okay, but why would their body stop the train? Just trust me, they'll stop the train. So how big of a backpack do they have? How do I even know I could push them? Well, just assume you can push them. How would I know I could push them? For the purposes of this thought experiment, you know you can push them. Well, what if I push them, they don't fall, then it's attempted murder, and then I don't even save anybody. Then I'll go to jail. I don't want to do that. No, you won't go to jail. Well, why wouldn't I go to jail? It's attempted murder. Then you won't get charged with anything. Why not? So you'll have these back and forths with people sometimes where they object to the features of the scenario. And as you keep building on things, there's no schools around. You know for sure that the body will stop the train. You know for sure they'll die in impact. You know for sure that the 5 people will be rescued and safe afterwards. There's not going to be like a second train colliding with that one. The two are, it's enough force to smash the person's corpse and run all 5 people over and then smash into 2 residential buildings. Like, you just have to say, nope, suspend all of those considerations. None of that is going to happen. You're not going to go to prison based on your decision. This isn't going to happen. That isn't going to happen. Just consider it with all of these things held constant. Anyway, I'm belaboring the point here. The point here is that when you're giving a thought experiment, the whole point is to isolate the 2 considerations. Hey, do you have a deontological approach to this or a utilitarian approach to this? And if people start interjecting, oh, but that's not how the real world is, as you keep adding all these conditions, there's no schools around, you're not going to go to prison, nobody's going to know what decision you made, it increasingly becomes artificial by design. That's intentional. That's actually a strength of a thought experiment. So when he starts saying, like, you're considering these artificial scenarios instead of the real world, I think it sounds to me like a misunderstanding of what the purpose of a thought experiment is. No, you take the insights you gain from the way you consider thought experiments, which give you these, which are often very artificial. They give you insight into principles or commitments you may have that are implicit, that you didn't immediately recognize, that aren't necessarily salient. They bring them to the surface, and then you can see that you could then reapply. Those are the principles I'm actually committed to on reflection. Yeah, I really do think that way. I do think, for instance, this isn't my actual view, but it's a view someone could have. I do think it's wrong to use people as a means to an end. You shouldn't use people as a means to an end. So it would be okay to pull the switch, and it wouldn't be okay to push the person. And then you could apply that to real world scenarios. So for instance, you might think it would be okay. It wouldn't be okay to intentionally bring about a disaster that would kill people in order to prompt the government to take precautionary measures, because then you're using those deaths as a means to an end. So that wouldn't be morally permissible. And that's a real world policy decision you might make. But it would be okay, for instance, to allow a natural disaster to proceed, to not intervene in order to bring about. So you wouldn't cause one, but you might allow one to happen. So you might discover that I probably would be against both of those. Let's not let any natural disasters happen. But a person might adhere to a principle like that. And so the point just is, you can take the like, oh, okay, so means to an end, I'm against that, but I'm not against allowing something to happen if it brings about a greater good. That might be a view a person ends up realizing that they have on consideration of the footbridge and trolley, and then they apply that to the real world. So this idea that if you consider these artificial scenarios, that you're considering them in lieu of or instead of thinking about the real world, is just not true. You take the insights from these and you apply them to the real world. Oh, right. Let's check the chat. I know I just said a whole lot there. Oh, hey, Nitty, what's up? Haven't seen you in a while. How's it going? Are you asking about me? If I said I'll answer questions later? I said that I'm going to post an AMA video, and you could post questions there for me to answer in the AMA. But for now, you could just ask me questions now if you got like real-time stuff. Ask me questions. I'm cool with that. And it doesn't have to be about the video I'm having a look at. Yeah, see, look at this. I tried to explain in the context of game theory to someone the other week. They just kept saying that conditions are not equal in reality. It's a little weird. Like, imagine you're trying to do math to like, I don't know, solve some problem as an engineer or something. And someone says, yeah, but like actual screws are not all equal in mass. So you can't just say that they all are, whatever, like 50, they can't all be 50 grams. Some of them are going to be 49.99993 grams, and some are going to be 50.0002 grams. So you can't say they're all 50 grams. It's not technically accurate. This, like, reality requires approximation. I don't know why some people have this sort of reaction. Oh, someone commenting on the trolley. Let's see. The only problem with the trolley problem is that epistemic cumulate. Oh, hey, Stan, is that you? What's up? I think it is. The only problem in trolley problems is that epistemic humility is probably the source of a lot of our moral discomfort in such situations, akin to a sterile lab experiment that never reflects a messy world. Maybe so. I'm not saying they're perfect, and I'm not saying that lack of realism can't generate problems, but the degree and nature to which it does so needs to be handled, I think, on a piecemeal basis. And it doesn't mean that just in general, unrealistic thought experiments are bad. They can be unrealistic in ways that are not good. So if you're trying to do a study that's examining people's moral attitudes and you give them a thought experiment that's like really funny, if you make people laugh, that actually changes their affect, it changes their emotions, and that can influence the way that they respond to a thought experiment in an unintended way. If that's not a feature of what you're trying to prompt them to do, you're actually introducing a bias. And you don't want to do that. So thought experiments certainly can be unrealistic, or they could influence people's psychology in ways that could undermine the intended purpose of the thought experiment. I'm not denying that at all. I'm not saying thought experiments are all good, they're perfect, leave them alone. Absolutely, we should be critical and scrutinize thought experiments. But the kind of objection I'm seeing here seems too general. Maybe he has more to say, and I'm doing the thing again where I pause before someone gets to a thought. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But we'll see. I think I'm still going to just object to his perspective on thought experiments, at least part of it. Oh, right. So Tony says, just joined earlier, but on the point of Craig rejecting some thought experiments, I can somewhat understand his point. Some thought experiments might just be so far removed that insights don't apply. That might be true. And so if he could point to a specific thought experiment and say, I think this thought experiment is ridiculous or not useful, and here's why, I'd be fine with that. But it does sound like he has like a broader and more general objection to thought experiments. And I don't agree with that. Yeah, I agree with this. The point is legit. You can't just broadly dismiss all thought experiments just because they are different in some way. Is this the same Ayn Rand guy? Yes, it is. Patrick says, some answer Charlie problem with, I feel this is true, but if it happened, what I would do would be a question of psychology. And that always makes me wonder what their first standard was. I'm not super clear on what you mean there. Are you drawing attention to the difference between a person saying, I think you should pull the switch, but I don't know if I actually would in the real world? Not trying to be disrespectful, but didn't this guy's performance in the Alex O'Connor debate suggest he's not someone worth taking seriously in the first place? I don't know if, because I talk to people with all different backgrounds and all different perspectives, and I think you could get a lot of insight into people's perspectives on things, regardless of whether like. Look, I could tell you, I don't buy into the Ayn Rand perspective at all. Like, I think it's a pretty unconvincing position, to say the least. I will say, though, that I have talked to quite a few proponents of Ayn Rand's views that come off as cold and callous, not all of them. And Craig very much didn't give me that impression. And if someone can represent a perspective in a way that is more palatable, I'll give credit to that too. And this commentary about thought experiments, I thought was worth addressing and talking about.
Through that, how we should do things in reality. And so it just, I'm not going to entertain the idea of, suppose things don't have the natures that they have, right? Suppose a bird doesn't have wings, or suppose, as one person put it in the comments on the channel, suppose a triangle has 4 sides instead of 3.
Okay, well, that's a little silly, because that's like logically impossible. It's just nonsense. So I would object to that. Like, if someone said, suppose an object that by definition must only have 3 sides has 4 sides, then they're just talking nonsense. It's like, suppose there's the married bachelor. So I would find that objectionable. But suppose a bird doesn't have wings, I don't see why you couldn't suppose that. That doesn't seem like an issue. Maybe that would be a silly thing to suppose, but there are some birds that don't have wings.
Now let's, proceed to try to.
By the way, in case that sounds insane, there are some birds that don't have wings. I don't mean like species of birds that don't have wings. I don't know if there's any of those. Probably not. I mean, there are birds that don't fly. That's not what I mean. I mean that there's probably birds that, I don't know. had their wings amputated for medical reasons and it really sucks, but like at least the bird's alive and maybe hopefully someone's taking care of it. Like that has to have happened before. So like it's not a bird now. Brenda asks, what do you think of Keith Frankish's Illusionist? It seems very attractive to me. So I hold and for a very long time have held a view more or less in line with Frankish's view. I was an illusionist back when the only illusionist I knew about was Dennett, from way back in the day. I remember when I was a student at Tufts, so I did, for people that may be joining me, or I don't know how often I mention this, but I did my master's in philosophy at Tufts back about, it's over 10 years ago now. It's 2012 when I started. So Dan Dennett was one of my professors there. He's great. Lots of great professors there. Ray Jackendolf, I took courses with him. He had this class, what was it called? Cognition, Culture, and Society, something. I can't remember exactly the culture. Exactly the name of the class. Cognition, Culture, and Language? I can't remember the name. It was such a cool class. I remember, I think I kind of showed up late for the first, I think I couldn't find the building or something. It was some stupid reason. And I came into the class, I rushed in, maybe I was on time. I don't remember exactly, whatever. Memories of the past suck, for me at least. It's people that are like, I remember when I was 3. I don't remember 30 minutes ago. So I came in this class and I think it was something like he was just asking about handshaking, like what goes on when people shake hands or greet one another. And he just filled a chalkboard with all the details the class came up with. And that was the whole class. It was like the whole class just building and building and building. Here's more details. Here's more details. Here's more details of a simple act of people greeting one another. And he didn't need a lecture. He didn't need a bunch of PowerPoint slides. But the class worked with him for us to collectively build the point that the lesson ended up illustrating, which is that every simple aspect, something that flies under the radar for people, like simply shaking someone's hand, simply greeting someone, bowing, saying hello. There's such a rich degree of subtext and cultural considerations and like normative considerations. There's so much that goes on in these little minor interactions that you could just pull a million details out of them. And it's like, okay, the takeaway I got from that was, okay, now extrapolate that to all of human behavior. And there's just so much there. It was just really cool as a lesson. It was just like mega ultra effective. That was just an awesome class. I love that class. So yeah, I had a great time there. But so Dennett's an illusionist. But what I was going to say about that is I took a course at Dennett the first semester. I think it was Philosophical Foundations of Cognitive Science. That was also awesome. And I remember a lot of the students were very skeptical of his views about illusionism. We did have a couple people there that were sympathetic to his views, but quite a lot of people were very, very, very skeptical or critical. I don't remember the particular impression of students, but I could certainly tell you outside of Tufts, a lot of people that I've encountered just laugh at illusionism. They think it's ridiculous. They mock it. They ridicule it. And these are like professional philosophers just treat it in many cases with incredulity, contempt, or just mirthful scorn. Like they're not even like, I hate it. They're like, huh, it's so stupid. And it's just this, I don't like that attitude. I don't like the way it's treated when it's not taken seriously, and it should be. Anyway, illusionism, this might sound weird. It was just sort of immediately attractive to me. Immediately, I was like, oh yeah, that seems right. Like right away. And I don't know how common that is even for people that come around to illusionism. It didn't take a lot of proselytizing to get me on board. And part of that is that I never really had like qualia intuitions or anything like that. I've had people try to prompt me to have them, and it just never worked. Always just struck me as nonsense, as far back as I recall thinking about it. I mean, maybe there was a time where it's like, oh no, I get it, but not for a very long time, if at all. But yeah, illusionism is a really cool view. I don't know if you see me talk to Pete Mandic, but I take it a little further than I guess you could say conventional illusionism, and that I favor a view called qualia quietism that's advocated by Pete Mandic, where it's not just that I deny that there's qualia, I deny that non-trivial characterizations of qualia are even meaningful. I think it's just not, it's meaningless. Like, I don't think there's anything meaningful to say about it. So I'm a quietist about quality of talk. Yeah, so you could say, like, I think Lance is just being more diplomatic than some of us. Well, there's a certain sense in which that's true. I mean, imagine I get in a stream and I say this person's not worth taking seriously, or this person's a big dumb idiot. Um, if I went around saying that, it's people that I'm talking about probably aren't going to want to talk to me. So I'm not going to pretend that I'm not being diplomatic if I'm being a bit diplomatic. But the other thing about that is I also have to, when you're pressed into feeling like it's a good idea to be diplomatic, it's also prompted me to reconsider whether I really think the most worthwhile thing to think about people is something critical or negative in a way that saying it and thinking it and advocating it and going out of my way to press that point is really a useful contribution to a discussion in the first place. Is it? Like, why not say the thing, criticize this thing that they say and praise this other thing they say and focus on the views and not so much on the people, unless there's a very good reason to do so. So Alex and Craig seem like perfectly nice people. If like, I don't know, if they were saying horrible things or being bad people, I might bring that up and go, yeah, I don't like them because of this bad thing that they did. But if someone just says a view I object to, or even if they say a lot of things I object, there's lots of, like, I almost can't, like, I think people will talk about Parfit, like Parfit's the greatest philosopher ever. And I just have never I found Parfit profoundly underwhelming. But I don't know what good it would do for me to go around saying, like, Parfit is a big dum-dum. Like, just substitute in the harsh things people will say, like, this philosopher sucks and they're a moron. What value is there in that? I mean, I just think if you're going to say something like that about someone, it's got to be really extreme what they're saying or doing. And it's just usually not the case. Even if I think someone makes like very weak points in a particular philosophical context, if you sit down and talk to that person, they might be very knowledgeable about a whole bunch of practical stuff, everyday stuff, historical knowledge, that just people being super wrong and having bad philosophical practices and habits and takes on things doesn't mean that the person isn't generally very smart and knowledgeable, even smarter than me, more knowledgeable than me. And that's just something I've had to come to accept. I don't want to put people in boxes. And maybe feeling a desire to be diplomatic has made that more salient for me. And it's actually improved the way I evaluate people and the things that people say. Or I'm just rationalizing, not wanting to be too blunt. Who knows? Maybe I'm rationalizing. All right, got another question here. How can I be any confident in my beliefs when I know there are many very smart people that would disagree with every position I have? It's a tough question to answer. I think it's really tough because there are cases where I'm inclined to defer to what lots of really smart people think about something. And that's usually a couple conditions need to be met. One is that I know that I'm not knowledgeable about the topic. And two is that I have a sense that the people who are knowledgeable about the topic, it's the kind of topic that has been vetted well enough that there's some sort of publicly evaluable criteria that validates the competency of the people that generally agree on the matter. So to give it, like, I know I give this example a lot, but I guess because I think it's a good example. If a bunch of engineers told me, hey, don't cross that bridge, it's not going to hold up. There are big structural problems with it. There's 50 engineers and they're all like, every one of them is like, yeah, don't cross that. Even if there was like one that's like, you'd probably be fine. No, I think I'm going to stay off that bridge. But if a group of philosophers, if 70% of philosophers say, oh, this position is correct, not that position, I don't put a lot of stock in that. And part of that is because I don't think, I mean, one is if you look at the distribution of philosophers agreeing and disagreeing, it's just like it's wild. Like, it's every philosopher seems to disagree on half the things and agree on the other half of the things almost randomly. Like, it's real weird how much they disagree. Basically, I see very little by way of substantive philosophical consensus on at least matters that philosophers are surveyed about. Maybe there's a bunch of consensus issues and they're so in the background now we don't think to ask them. But I don't think philosophy has the kind of track record where I would feel that moved by the fact that 60 or 70% of philosophers think something. Just don't put that much into it. And there would have to be these meta epistemic principles for when do you judge Like how much of a percentage matters, what discipline. So, okay, engineers, I'm going to trust the engineers. Philosophy, I'm not going to trust the philosophers. And well, I mentioned with engineers, I have very little knowledge and they have a whole lot of knowledge that's like very publicly corroborated. And in the case of philosophy, I have comparatively more knowledge, and I think they have comparatively less publicly corroborated knowledge. So the sort of gap closes in that case, where I'm more comfortable in one case than the other in deviating from, the sort of consensus view. Like, I'm not going to dispute, I don't know, medical stuff, climate stuff, because I don't have relevant domain knowledge. If the consensus is one way, I'm going to assume that they're probably right. But when it comes to meta-ethics, hell no. Like, of course I'm not going to do that because I have knowledge within that domain. And if someone says no, but you should defer anyway, that would lead to really weird implications. Because if you're an expert and you're a dissident, should there be no dissident? Should everybody always concede to what the majority position is? What if there's currently no majority position? Can you never arrive at one? If you do arrive at one, does it, like, as soon as, if there's 1,000 scientists and as soon as you hit 501, think theory A is correct and theory B is incorrect, do the other 499 have an obligation to just suddenly shift over? That'd be really bizarre, right? So I think there's got to be room for epistemic leeway for people that work in a particular field to deviate from people that hold contrary views. Like, basically, I think there's got to be room for people that have dissonant views. Otherwise, our views would stagnate. We would be able to get new views. Like, sometimes people, the whole minority views are right. And that's an important thing any good, broad epistemological framework would need to accommodate. But, I mean, if the concern more here is more that, like, you'll find somebody that disagrees with you, I would stop worrying about that. Sure, you're going to find smart people that disagree with you. There's too many people in the world. And with the internet, it's too easy to find out someone that, there's someone somewhere that disagrees with you that seems to know what they're talking about. If moral realism is true, would your moral beliefs change? Well, I would probably believe moral realism is true, but my normative moral beliefs probably wouldn't change, and my practical behavior probably wouldn't change. It's really going to depend on exactly what kind of realism we're talking about and what the implications of it are. But I suspect I would be like, I guess I was wrong about that, and then very little would change. We got someone agreeing with me. Qualia is plain nonsense. Hell yeah. We got to push that more. So Jimothy says, many people are very confident about things they have little knowledge about. Confidence doesn't really have much to do with truth. The fact that you're confident, you aren't so confident is probably good. I can agree with that. I think that's good too. Yeah, not being confident, but like it's hard to balance out. Like, hey, it's basically, I'll put it this way: it's hard to balance out epistemic humility with epistemic passivity. You don't want to be like, you want to have a certain degree of humility, but you don't want to be so humble that you always defer to authorities on literally everything in every domain. I mean, that then you never like willing to say, I think that they're wrong about this. I think people need you need a little bit of epistemic confidence, but not too much of it. And I think it may be more important to appraise the level of confidence you ought to have for any given issue. And as you get more knowledgeable, your confidence can increase, and it would be warranted in increasing in those cases. Mahianus Mind says, I can't really fault people for rejecting qualia, considering how fraught it is in the literature and in the discipline. Yeah, fair enough. Kind of like free will debates. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The whole tenor of the debate and the presumption involved is fraught with mistakes and errors. Again, from Mahianus Mind. In case someone's listening to this and they just hear me saying random stuff. I agree with that too. Cool. Yeah, we're on the same page on that. Saying you're diplomatic was not a criticism. It's probably, oh, sorry. This is from Jimothy, who says, saying you're a diplomatic was not a criticism. It's probably a good thing to be. Things have their ups and downs. It has its ups and downs. There are times I feel like I pull my punches where I probably shouldn't pull my punches. And there are times where I really want to say what I think, and I don't feel like I can. All right. If you're wondering why I'm not talking, I'm just looking through the comments. Looking for something to bring up here. Ask better questions. No, I'm kidding. I'm not skipping over a bunch of questions. All right, we got another high. Jeremy Gord, hey, how's it going? All right, looking through, looking through. Have you heard of the YouTuber Planet Peterson? He recently did a couple videos about inspiring philosophy. I briefly saw on Facebook a clip where I saw it was I think it was Planet Peterson, and then inspiring philosophy responding to that, but I don't remember the context or what it was about. Uh, I, Planet Peterson, does that? Okay, let me look this up, because my initial reaction to Planet Peterson is that like some channel related to Jordan Peterson? Is it? I don't know. What is Planet Peterson? I guess I don't know what this is. If someone knows who Planet Peterson is, can you explain who they are to me? I don't see a description. Welcome to Planet Peterson. Oh, okay. Eric Peterson, high school science teacher. Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. It's just a person that also has the name Peterson, as if it's not a super common name. I'm so sorry about that, Planet Peterson. If that's just comes from your name. But yeah, making videos, experiment, educational videos, scientific and historical worldview. Okay, I'd have to see the channel to say anything about it. I just don't know what it's about. So yeah, if you have more information, feel free. What was the interaction with inspiring philosophy? You know, I sent inspiring philosophy a couple messages over the past, I don't know, like 5 or 6 years, like just here and there, like, hey, I'd like to talk about meta ethics at some point. And I think another one might have been about free will. I think it was free will or intuitions, something like, because I wrote a blog series on my blog a couple of years ago addressing some commentary that involves inspiring philosophy, but I never heard back. So I don't know why inspiring philosophy doesn't get back to me. Maybe just I don't know. But I'm open to a discussion, and if he doesn't want to talk to me, that I guess it's fine. No one has to want to talk to me. Patrick asks, Lance, do you believe in smarlia? It's when you feel the feeling of qualia. Oh yeah, no, totally. I totally have smarlia. I hope that's not some an actual word that means something horrible, and that you just made that up. Okay, not related to JP, thankfully. Okay, thanks for confirming that. No, he hasn't heard of Planet Peterson. Okay. Biology teacher usually talks about evolution. Oh, okay. Well, that sounds promising. Skeptic and apologist stuff. Yeah, I think the thing it had something to do with religion, because I don't recall inspiring philosophy talking about evolution much, or I don't know what inspiring philosophy's views on evolution are. Does anyone know? I'd be interested. Oh, hey Sam. Sam asks, any thoughts about what's going on with the people who do have qualia intuition? Some people say they're the thing they are most sure of. Yeah, I do hear this. Like Sam Harris will say stuff like, the facts of consciousness is the one thing you like or can be most sure of, or that you can't, can't doubt. I don't know exactly what Sam Harris says, but people say stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know what they're talking about. And I try to avoid that phrasing, but because they'll say, oh, well, we know what we're talking about, so you're the problem here. Now, I don't think they know what they're talking about. And then that's when people go, but that's too. So if I say, I don't know what I don't know what they're talking about, that could sound too passive and conciliatory. But if I say I don't think they know what they're talking about, that can sound like I'm being really rude and offensive. But if you literally hold the view that the cause of a certain sort of claim is a conceptual confusion, and that the person making the claim doesn't really have a concept that they think they have, technically you think that they don't know what they're talking about. So I don't mean that in a pejorative sense. I mean that I think they're mistaken in a very particular kind of way. And people often take that really badly. They take it as like this really offensive and rude thing to say, whereas it wouldn't be rude or offensive to say, I think you're mistaken because qualia don't exist. And it's like, well, why is thinking that your mistake is a subtle conceptual confusion really offensive and rude, but saying you got the facts wrong isn't? I think there's something off with that appraisal. Barney Mayerson says, it would be interesting if you responded to Inspiring Philosophy's video, are the non-religious better than Christians? I've actually seen, if there's more than one video, maybe I haven't seen them all, but I've certainly seen at least one video from Inspiring Philosophy on that. Problem with that is I don't know the research on that. So Inspiring Philosophy in that case, like, seems to dig into literature. And if his appraisal of the literature is right, like, he might just be correct. I don't know. It's the kind of thing where I could evaluate that research. It's not like I don't have the ability to go look at the research and evaluate it. I just don't want to, I don't have time for that. That's just a big research project, and I have more important things to do with my time. So, if he's did a big research dive on that and came to those conclusions, it's just the kind of thing where it would be a big time investment to address that. I wouldn't want to address something that really involves such an overwhelming degree of, like, it's a sort of thing where the only way to properly address it is to engage directly with the empirical literature by sitting down and reading it. And it's not the sort of thing you could shoot from the hip from and just be like, well, I think this about the literature. No, you got to read it. And I just don't have the time to do that. So that's probably not going to happen. I can't see myself sitting down and reading the literature on the relative benefits of religiosity versus secularism on like mental health and societal flourishing, whatever metrics you would end up using for that. Crime rates, economic growth, like societal trust. There's a bunch of metrics you could use. I feel very silly for going, is Planet Peterson related to... I just saw that and I was like, I'm going to stay a million miles away from anything Peterson related, but whatever. Lance, I have an idea. This is from Brenda. I have an idea that what people really mean by qualia is their past associations with a percept, like the smell of coffee can trigger all my past memories. Yeah, I think there might be something to that. And, but that's not what they say that the qualia are. So if you're offering a psychological or like a descriptive account of what is prompting people to think that they have qualia, yeah, I think that there might be something to this idea. But it's certainly not going to be their own reflective appraisal of what they take themselves to be doing, which is fine. They could just be wrong about what they're doing, which, in fact, I think they are. I just don't know exactly why, and this is an interesting proposal. Yeah. I like that. Good memories equals good qualia. Again, that's a remark from Brenda. Cool. Okay, lots of people talking about qualia. All right, well, we'll keep at it. Let's have a little bit more of a look at this video. One moment. Okay.
Figure out some geometrical principles on this basis. It just doesn't make any sense. So I know that the history of philosophy is littered with these things. Plato talks about the ring of Gyges, and suppose you were invisible and undetectable, and you could get away with anything, or
That's a fun
and if
one.
I were to put that into the modern term, suppose the bank robber gets to the islands, but he robs the bank, but he's invisible and undetectable, so he can't get caught, et cetera, et cetera. We're not dealing with reality if we accept that as some kind of a premise. And I want to deal with reality.
It's weird. We're not dealing with reality if we deal. What is he? I don't know what he means by that. We're not dealing with reality. No, we're not dealing with reality. What's objectionable about that?
Because that's where we are, and that's where we need morality. So hopefully this is to some extent helpful. Again, to be emphatic here, I'm not against hypotheticals. Hypothetical examples are really helpful, and I use them all the time in my writing. I'm against metaphysically impossible hypotheticals that take us away from reality. If you think about it, this is what happens when people talk about God or hell.
it's totally obscure to me what he considers an acceptable or an unacceptable thought experiment. If you have a sense of what he has in mind, like what about being invisible is that metaphysically impossible? Why would that be metaphysically impossible?
Right? Suppose there's a hell, and if you don't do the things that God, and he also exists, right, that he says, you're going to go to hell. Well, this is precisely the kind of stuff, that nonsensical stuff that the religious people do. And I am not a religious person, and I'm not a person of faith, and I'm not.
Okay, yeah, he's not, but that doesn't mean you can't entertain the hypothetical. I don't I don't see what's nonsensical about that. Like it's, I mean, it might be nonsensical like in the colloquial sense of being like absurd, but it's not nonsensical in the sense of being like logically impossible or you know, not making any sense.
Not a person of hypothetical examples that don't make sense. I'm a person of reason and reality, and I want to stay focused on what's going on here. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
why
that's I want to stay focused on what's going on here. I think there's a problem with his perspective on this stuff. Like I want to like I'm not going to entertain these hypotheticals because it's got to be about here. That I don't I don't think that's a good way to approach this stuff. Like I'm not going to go modal realism or something, but like I don't see a problem with entertaining counterfactuals in which the counterfactual involves a description of a world that's radically different from our own. It might not be useful, but the mere fact that it's radically different from our own world or isn't realistic is not by itself a reason to dismiss its philosophical relevance. Yeah, I don't agree with this.
oppose those kinds of examples. All right. Number two, question two. What do you mean by subjective, objective, and morality?
Oh boy. Oh boy. What my bread and butter. So let's see where this goes.
Now, this is a really good question, and I think we touched on this to some extent in the debate, but I'll elaborate on it here. So, in philosophy, subjective, if it's going to carry any meaning when we're talking about morality or epistemology, knowledge, it means the functions of the consciousness detached from, so not corresponding to, external reality.
That's a what? I'm gonna have to listen to that again. I'm gonna have to take a little break, grab a drink, and do all that stuff. But it looks like I got a couple questions here. Lance, wait, is everything logically impossible nonsensical, like pi being rational? I mean, it's really just going to depend on what exactly you mean by nonsensical. Like nonsensical has like colloquial uses, it has technical uses. Like I would like a nonsensical. I don't know if I would say that that's like a technical term. And if I were going to use it as a technical term, I think I would just stipulate and iron out a particular definition for the purposes of whatever essay I was writing or conversation I was having. So is everything logically impossible, quote, nonsensical? Maybe it's just going to depend on what you mean by nonsensical. Yeah. Okay. So I will be right back in a minute. Just going to take a quick break. In fact, just so things don't get boring, let me just play this and then I'll just rewind it as needed. But I'll let my thoughts, keep going.
So whims or just going by emotions or saying, well, I believe it because it's true, or I choose to, as Diane Hershey Ali said recently, I choose to believe in God. So there's no external fact that her consciousness is corresponding to. It's just the sheer choice to believe in God. Well, that is subjective because it's just completely detached from reality. And then a lot of times people think that objective means that the thing is out there, right? So truth or goodness is out there. And that is not the proper meaning of objective. And Ayn Rand came up with a really good alternative. So instead of having a dichotomy between subjective and objective, she said there's really a trichotomy. There's subjective, which is the just in here, detached from reality. There's the intrinsic, which is the idea that the good or the true is out there. And it's out there apart from any consciousness being aware of it. So this is the idea that, for instance, either Plato's form of the good or the Christian view that, God's commandments dictate and therefore are what is true and good, regardless of whether anybody accepts them, right? That's the idea that good and truth are out there. But neither of these ideas is accurate. What's accurate is, if you think about the historically correct and the sort of Greek view of what truth is. Truth is correspondence to reality, right?
We're going to stop that there.
Recognition.
And we gotta take this back to where he was characterizing subjective before he gets to this trichotomy part. So let's bring this back. Let's see.
Saying, well, I believe it because it's true, or I choose to, as I in her, to external reality. So whims, or just going by emotions, or saying, well, I believe it because it's true, or I choose to, as I in her, at least said recently, I choose to believe in God. So there's no external fact that her consciousness is corresponding to. It's just the sheer choice to believe in God. Well, that is subjective because it's just
that's. So there's a few issues to this. One is saying, hey, here's a characterization, and this characterization is subjective. Now, that's not saying if something is subjective, then it's this characterization. It's instead giving an example of something and then saying it's an instance of something that's subjective. Like if someone said, someone describes a German Shepherd and says, and that's a dog. That doesn't mean if something's a dog, it's a German Shepherd. It does mean if it's a dog, if it's a German Shepherd, it's a dog. It doesn't follow that if it's a dog, it's a German Shepherd. So I don't know which of those he's going with. Is this an instance of something being subjective? Like, hey, if you choose to believe something because you want to believe it or whatever, on a whim or whatever, that's an instance of your belief being held on subjective grounds. Okay, maybe that's true. Does that mean all subjective beliefs are held because you want to hold them? Are they all doxastically voluntary? I don't know. His characterization here doesn't seem very clear. But so there would be that issue. But if he is suggesting that if it's subjective, that means you choose to believe it, that's not true. And I'll get to that when he finishes up here.
Completely detached from reality. And then a lot of times people think that objective means that
No, he had a couple things to say. Let's take it back and let him finish
fact
the whole way through.
that her consciousness is corresponding to, it's just the sheer choice to believe in God. Well, that is subjective because it's just completely detached from reality.
Yeah, it's because it's subjective because it's detached from reality. And this remark about your consciousness corresponding to things, that all honestly, it just strikes me as obscure. I'm not really sure what he's saying here, but this is fairly idiosyncratic as far as a characterization of subjective goes. There's different senses of the term subjective. In a meta-ethical context, subjective would often be used specifically to refer to a particular way in which claims would be indexed to the standards of individuals specifically, as opposed to groups. So I would often use the term subjective to mean a specific type of relativism, individual relativism. You might call it individual subjectivism. And so this would be a bit like the way like individual people's names work, where they're indexed to the individual, or food preferences. Food preferences are indexed to the individual, not typically to groups. Whereas something like laws or cultural practices might be indexed typically to group standards. So that's how I use the term subjective, that it means something like the truth status of the moral claim is indexed to the standards of the person making the claim, or the speaker, or the person evaluating the claim. These are all possibilities. So that's what it would mean. It's something to do with the indexing of the truth standards of moral claims. And I don't know what all this stuff about choosing to believe things and consciousness and corresponding to reality and being detached from reality. That's all very unconventional as a characterization of subjectivism. It's just strange. I don't know why you would characterize it that way. It's not. I don't know of any philosophers that would characterize it that way. All right. Let's see. Comments. Okay, let's keep going.
And then a lot of times people think that objective means that the thing is out there, right? So truth or goodness is out there. And that is not the proper meaning of objective. And Ayn Rand,
This is a strange remark. The proper meaning of objective. Is there a proper meaning? What does he mean by that? Who decides on the proper meaning of objective? It's a word. People use it in different ways. Like one use of objective means to like done without bias or prejudice towards like partisanship. That's a use. There's lots of uses. Like it. So if he's using it in a particular technical sense and it has a proper meaning within a particular discourse, like within contemporary analytic metaethics or within this particular philosophical community, which community is he talking about that it's proper? Or is it this is like universally proper? Because that wouldn't make a lot of sense. Like a universally correct definition in both colloquial and technical context, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I don't know what he means by proper here.
came up with a really good alternative. So instead of having a dichotomy between subjective and objective, she said there's really a trichotomy. There's subjective, which is the just in here, detached from reality. There's the intrinsic.
Why is subjective detached from reality? What does that mean? So like I have subjective food and music preferences. Are they detached from reality? Detached how? I wish he would explain what he means by this. I don't know what that means. Anyone know what that means? I mean, maybe you're familiar with like Rand's framing of things. I don't know if this is Randian or what it is.
Which is the idea that the good or the true is out there. And it's out there apart from any consciousness being aware of it. So this is the idea that, you know, for instance,
apart from a consciousness being aware of it? Yeah, I mean, there's some tangential way in which that would be related to a standard characterization of subjectivism and metaethics, but I don't know. This would need clarification for me to know what he's getting at here. I'm not really sure.
Either Plato's form of the good or the Christian view that, you know, God's commandments dictate and therefore are what is true and good, regardless of whether anybody accepts them, right? That's the idea that good and truth are out there. But neither of these ideas.
Yeah, maybe when he says good and truth are out there, he's alluding to stance independent. Like he's referring to stance independence, and then subjectivism is stance dependent, maybe. And then maybe he just has a very different way of articulating that. I'm not really sure.
Accurate. What's accurate is if you think about the historically correct and the sort of Greek view of what truth is. Truth is correspondence to reality, right?
Historically correct? So that's ambiguous between like correct, like in terms of accurately characterizing how the term, a particular term or concept was used historically, and in terms of it being correct because it captures the like correct history or roots of the use of the term or something. Which of those does he mean? Like the Greeks thought about truth this way, and so it's true that they thought about it, so it's historically accurate that they thought about it this way. Or is it that historically it was thought about this way, so the proper use of the term is the way that it's being, is the way that I'm framing it? I think it means the second one.
Recognition of reality. And so it's got the in here part and the out there part. And
yeah, so Jeremy says, Lance, this is Rand creating two straw men so that she can claim all of her specific views to merely be splitting the middle. So like subjectivism is just the inside, objectivism is the outside, and then her view in her dichotomy is both. Is that the idea here?
And it is correspond. What's accurate is if you think about the historically correct and the sort of Greek view of what truth is. Truth is correspondence to reality, right?
Is that the Greek view? Does anyone know? Like, I don't have a good sense of like ancient Greek views about truth, but I mean, one question asked is, why would I care what the ancient, like I might be, sorry, I should say, I'm very curious what the view is, but it's not that like I would go, oh, so that's what Plato thought. Well, it must be true then. That's the sense in which I'm like, I don't particularly care if Plato thought something, in the sense of like how much it's going to inform my current philosophical take on things. I would take it to be interesting if Plato or Aristotle or Epicurus or somebody had a particular philosophical perspective, especially if it was similar in some ways to some contemporary view. But it's not like if you could convince me Aristotle thought something that I would be like, oh, well, it's got to be true then. It's not to say I wouldn't care. It might be really cool. I was just telling someone the other day that was like, I used to have this attitude like, I don't want to do the history of philosophy stuff. But then, when I took some courses, I was like, no, actually, this is pretty cool. I like this. But, it's not as directly relevant to the kind of philosophy that I do. And I do think if some people's approach, like the kinds of philosophy and psychology stuff I do, history is not very relevant directly to it. And I feel like why force me to do a bunch of history? Maybe the same thing. Why force a person that's into history to do a bunch of stuff that might not be so? Maybe they shouldn't take as many logic courses. I don't know. It's maybe it doesn't make sense to customize people's educations too much. I don't see why it wouldn't be feasible, but whatever. I'm not a school administrator. How would I know?
Recognition of reality. And so it's got the in here part and the out there part. And if you're recognizing reality, so recognition is in here and reality is out there, that union is what objective properly means. It's recognition of fact,
okay.
recognition of truth,
trying to characterize,
recognition of a particular standard of value and the reasons why it's a standard of value, the facts that support the idea that, for instance, life is the standard of value. And that's
is this supposed to be a characterization of objective? Because that's not how anybody uses that term now that I'm aware of.
Why, as I tried to explain in the debate, I think that life is the standard of value because life
now
is
shifting
the
into normative
one
ethics.
fundamental and the only fundamental and truth are out there. But neither of these ideas is accurate. What's accurate is if you think about the historically correct.
Got it. Yeah. So he's giving the third part of the trichotomy here. He's not saying this is the objective. So you got the subjective, you get the objective, and then you got this view
of what truth is. And truth is correspondence to reality, right? It's recognition of reality. And so it's got the in here part and the out there part.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you're recognizing reality, so recognition is in here and reality is out there, that union is what objective properly means. It's recognition of fact, recognition of truth, recognition of a particular standard of value and the reasons why it's a standard of value, the facts that support the.
He might be making good distinctions here, but my honest impression is that this is expressed in a way that just comes off to me as extremely convoluted. This is really hard for me to follow. I'm just not sure precisely what's being claimed here. That doesn't mean that there isn't a clear view beneath the surface, but I think I would have to ask him a bunch of questions, or I'm not familiar with the philosophical basis he's coming from to basically grok what's being said here to where I'm like, now I get it. It's more like I'm like, what does he mean by that? What does he mean by that word? How is he using that term? I'd have a bunch of questions. I don't know other people's reaction. What do you think? Sam says, what I think he may be saying in a very convoluted way, subjective means just in the mind and objective means mind independent. Yeah, maybe. In the mind, though, is just not clear enough for me. I want it to be clearer than that. In the mind, in what sense? What does that mean? Iana says the ancient Greeks believed in correspondence theory for the most part. Well, I don't. So correspondence was Aristotle's view. How well does it map on to contemporary articulations of correspondence theory? I don't even know how diverse different views about correspondence theory, like how diverse do they get? How much do they, I don't know. There's a lot of questions to ask. I'm not going to ask them. I just wonder, how much are contemporary views based on ancient views, and how much do newer views develop, and then we project those characterizations on to ancient philosophers and say, they really thought this way all along. A lot of people in the comments really do not like Ayn Rand. Sam was like, I would think different ancient Greeks would have different views. Well, sure, so would I. I'm just trying to get a sense of what it, okay, let me give an example. Sometimes people will say, knowledge historically was justified true belief. And I'm not, who was saying that and when were they saying that? Was that a received view? Like it's not clear to me how historically accurate that is. And I worry that in some cases, because I don't have as much of a grounding in the history of philosophy as a lot of people that study that topic with much more zeal than I ever did. I worry about like anachronisms and people projecting modern, like contemporary views onto the past and saying, it was here all along, and getting into some like really dubious exegetical work to extract modern views and identify them in ancient texts when they weren't really there. And if you could ask the people, you could bring them here in a time machine and explain things to them and be like, no, I don't think that. I don't know. I worry about, like constant attempts to reinterpret past works over and over and over and give 17 different interpretations of the same text. Always suspiciously similar to the views of, some contemporary movement or approach. A lot of people talking about history here. I'm not going to put it all up here. So many comments on this. That's very cool. Thank you, everyone, for the input. I am reading them. I'm just not going to post them all. I'll post this one. Wow, so many comments. I'm trying to get caught up. This is very cool. So Mahayana says people definitely do that with Plato, and the pre-Socratics are suspicious well placed. You mean the one of where I worry about people projecting modern interpretations onto people in the past? Yeah, I read the stuff about Atlantis. That was strange. Hence the claim, quote, all philosophy is, this is from Jeremy, quote, all philosophy is footnotes to Plato only by disrespecting Plato enough to allow him to have meant anything. People have a lot of historical takes. It's, you take a few classes on this stuff. It's not like you really dug into the literature and done the kind of work someone would do if they really get into and specialize in certain historical periods. They're going to read a whole bunch of extra stuff, a bunch of secondary literatures, a bunch of the original text. They might even learn the languages to read stuff in earlier copies of texts. I didn't do any of that. So I would have to defer to those people. We were going back earlier to like how much you don't know about stuff and when you should or shouldn't think something because a bunch of smart. It's not just about people being smart. It's about people being knowledgeable, motivated. There's other features of a person's cognitive and intellectual and personality traits that you would use to judge the veracity of their claims. And that's just a case where I'd have to defer to the experts. Yeah, Patrick says Wittgenstein had a gun anecdote where he decided to read Plato later in life. I don't know what you mean by gun anecdote. To read Plato later in life and was upset to discover the other academics talk as if they hadn't read it. It really worries me. I have a friend that does work on classical pragmatists, particularly William James and F.C.S. Schiller. And he talks about neo-pragmatists and the way that they characterize and frame James, often critically or inaccurately, or ignore Schiller. And the impression I get is that it looks like a lot of them like don't appear to have comprehensively read James very much and to have based their judgments off of what might not be an accurate representation of what James actually thought. And I remember encountering reactions when I was reading John Stuart Mill. Like I was like, wow, Bentham and Mill really seem to have anticipated a lot of the objections that people typically raise against classical utilitarianism. Utilitarianism has spawned all these descendants that allegedly can rectify this or that shortcoming of classical utilitarianism. But to give an example, a lot of people say, oh, well, how would you go about making calculations if you had to use the Benthamic calculus all day? You'd never be able to get anything done. These are terrible. Like, hey, I'm not. Well, I guess it's not directed at anybody in particular, but it's not diplomatic. These are stupid objections. One of the most common objections to utilitarianism is, hey, if you did that utilitarian thing, you wouldn't maximize utility. Well, then it's not a utilitarian thing, is it, you idiot? Like, what kind of dumb objection is that? Like if someone says, hey, you should choose the economic policy that would maximize profits. And the reaction is, but if you did that, it wouldn't maximize profits. Jesus Christ. It's such a bad objection. Now, if someone says, well, okay, it's all well and good to say you should use the economic policy that maximizes profits. Which one is that? And so you're not helping us with answering that question, are you? But the person's like, no. But that's also not my goal. My goal is to just tell you what our goal is. It's not to tell you how to get there. And that's how I see utilitarian as a criterion of the right, not a criterion of like what you should or shouldn't do in any sort of an instrumental respect. It's just setting the standard, setting the goal. But then there's also the how do you make calculations all day? And I think it was Mill. Someone can correct me, maybe it was Bentham. I think it was Mill who talked about cultivating. You gotta just get in. You gotta develop heuristics and habits of thought and virtues. Just get it into your system that you're going to react this way rather than that way. That doesn't mean you're implementing a rule and the correct thing to do is to follow the rule. It's that the heuristic is the best way of optimizing, maximizing utility in the classical sense. So you just have a distinction between what the standard is and then the best ways of acting in accord with the standard, given the contingent limitations of human minds and the world that we're in, and bounded rationality and limited time and ability to make decisions and spend all day calculating. You don't have all day to do it. And it just looks like he already anticipated those problems and gave what I take to be pretty good answers to them. So why the hell were a bunch of people coming along and raising these objections as if he didn't already address them? One explanation is they just didn't freaking read them. They just didn't read it. I wonder how many people objected to when Darwin's Origin of Species came out. They didn't read it. It's kind of like and I've done this a couple times. Just follow the headlines, right? Somebody posts something on Facebook, I don't know, what's something silly, is Miley Cyrus a lizard alien? And then people responding, people are stupid with the conspiracies. And then the article doesn't actually have to it's not actually trying to answer that in the affirmative. And it's actually takes it in a different direction. And there's some clever way that's related to the content of the article, but no one's addressing that. They're just following the headline. I wonder how much people have responded to philosophers by taking the headlines. I think people do this with Dennett. So many people, they're, illusionism is so stupid. I don't know how many times I've had to see someone be corrected when they say something like, yeah, illusionists don't think people have minds, or they don't think people have experiences. And it's okay. No. If you want to talk about some kind of eliminativist, maybe they think that. Eliminativist about a broader, I'm an eliminativist about all mental states, then maybe you don't think people have minds. But someone that rejects that there are qualia is not saying necessarily that people don't have experiences. If you say, oh, well, by experiences, I mean phenomenal experience, experiences that involve qualia, fine. But could they not have a sense in which they think there's experiences that don't involve qualia? And if someone wants to bulk at that, there's something funny about the fact that, the compatibilist position can get praised for not succumbing to insisting on a libertarian conception or nothing. But if you have experience, can't thread the same needle and not get praised for saying, okay, well, we don't have to have the metaphysical mumbo jumbo or nothing. It doesn't have to be one or the other. We can have experiences without them involving quasi-mystical ineffability. Nope, apparently not. So the ineffability is ridiculous in the free will case, but it's totally necessary and obvious and you can't even doubt it without being a crackpot or a fool for qualia. What? Why? It just strikes me as weird. Oh, right. Analytics hate pragmatic theory of truth, going back to Russell's objections. Yep. Yes. And Russell had pretty bad objections. And I think a lot of critics just never really seem to understand pragmatism and never seem to want to understand it. Yeah, so I know. So Barney says Mill was all about higher and lower pleasures too. I know about that. I never found that compelling. I can't remember if yeah, I don't know. I feel like I wrote an essay on that once or critiquing that view, but I don't remember. Question Quanderer says, Lance, I had a professor tell me that he preferred to read synoptic biographies to understand some philosophers because he trusted them to explain the positions. Okay, fair enough. That sounds cool. Grant Miller says, I made the mistake of just taking headlines at face value too. Yeah, I've done it. I want to jump in the conversation right away. I get excited and I jump the gun and too quick and then don't look at the article. I've done it. It's embarrassing, but who says I haven't done stupid and embarrassing things? I thought I got caught up and then they found some more comments. Okay, pretty well caught up. Okay, let's maybe do a couple more minutes of this and then I'll head out. I got into 8 minutes of it. I'm the worst at reviewing videos, like 50 minutes, I think 7 of them.
The idea that, for instance, life is the standard of value. And that's why, as I tried to explain in the debate, I think that life is the standard of value because life is the one fundamental and the only fundamental phenomenon that gives rise to two things: the need of values and the possibility of values, right? So if you're not alive, you can't pursue values. And if you don't want to remain alive, you don't need to pursue values. And this fact is really an extremely powerful fact. If you think about this and toy with it in your mind for a while and understand and just think about why it is that if there's this one phenomenon and it's the only phenomenon that gives rise to the possibility and the need of values. So this is why values exist, and they exist to serve this thing. You go,
and they exist to serve this thing. Okay, so you can't value things if you're not alive. Okay, let's say that that's true. I don't see any reason to object. He had 2 points about it, right? What were the 2 points? I'm too tired to even
with it in your mind for a while and values, right? So if you're not alive, you can't pursue values.
Yep.
And if you don't want to remain alive, you don't need to pursue values.
Okay.
And
so if you don't want to remain alive, you don't need to pursue value. That seems false. A person can, like, let's say a person is terminally ill, but they want to like share secret information that'll save people's lives. Like they don't have to. Like at that point, they might not want to continue living because they know it's not possible. It's like not a reasonable desire to have at that point. Like, you know, they're about to die and they're like, let me tell you this one last secret, something like that. Under those circumstances, the person is valuing things that go beyond their own lives. I don't see why a person, I don't think that that's true. But the first part, sure. Okay, let's say you have to be alive to value things. All right, but that doesn't mean that the things you value have to be about your life or preserving your life. You could value other things independent of the degree to which they promote your life. You could value aesthetic purposes and stuff like that. I'm not saying you can't, like life isn't important or that you can't or shouldn't value it. Yeah, it's great. But you could also value other things. It's not like because life is needed for value, that value can only be about the service of life. Why would that be the case? Like, let's say we say, okay, well, you need the fundamental laws of physics to do anything in the world. Therefore, life is all about like complying with, like, serving the fundamental laws of physics. That'd be a really weird thing to say, right? Like, I'm not subservient to physics. I could want to do stuff other than serve whatever I take the ends of physics to be. That sounds really weird. But just the point should be pretty simple. The mere fact that if it's the case that life is necessary to value things, it doesn't mean that the only thing you could value is life.
This fact is really an extremely powerful fact. If you think about this and toy with it in your mind for a while, and understand, and just think about why it is that if there's this one phenomenon, and it's the only phenomenon that gives rise to the possibility and the need of values. So this is why values exist, and they exist to serve this thing. You go after the things that
Yeah, where is he getting that from? Why should I think that they exist to serve the thing? Does he have an argument for that? Why think that? I'm so puzzled by that.
you need in order to live, and a bird goes after the things that it needs in order to live, and so on. And you go after them. Why? So that you can live. Life is the standard of value.
Okay, I don't do things so that I can live. I live so that I can do the things I want to do. What is he talking about? Yeah, sure. I need life to be able to do the things I want to do. It doesn't mean the things I want to do all have to be about serving my life. Where is he getting this from? Where is this coming from? This is very puzzling. I had this comment. Matt Springfield says, nobody can accuse Lance of lazily letting a video play as filler content. That's true. I'll take that one. Thank you. I am anxious about that. Like, if you play somebody else's video, someone could think, you're just playing their video so that you could sort of like get views from their content. And I'm very self-conscious about that. I don't want to use somebody's video to get views from their content. I see it as a dialogue when I can't, like, maybe I could talk to Craig at some point, but I haven't set that up now. Maybe this will prompt them to want to talk to me. I don't know. But like, it's almost like a conversation with a person I'm not really talking to. So I get to be critical as much as I want, and they can't respond in real time. So it's like a well, that's a very unflattering way of putting it, but it's almost treating people's words as punching bags. Okay. Well, I framed it that way. So if it's critical, I'm criticizing myself. But I'm trying to build on the content. I'm not trying to just like just grab someone else's content for myself. So I appreciate that. Yeah. Oh, more comments. I'll play this. Well, I can't do both. I can't multitask that well.
That's what this theory is about. I'm surprised there's as much resistance as I'm seeing to this idea, because it really makes sense. And I think several people have commented in the thread about this, and realized that it does make sense. But the pushing against this is a bit strange, because you can see that it's life that gives rise to the possibility and need of values. Think about it, something that's not alive, a rock or a can, right, or a book. It just doesn't need anything to remain in existence.
Yeah. So Question Quander says, then the terminally ill person wants to continue living to share the information. But see, that's the point. Their being alive is a means to the end. The end itself isn't in the service of life. It's not like the thing they want to share is so that they can continue living, because they've already like, okay, well, they're not going to continue living. So why would they be acting in order to continue living if they know that's not an option? They could still want to achieve other things. Like, people write down wills because they want things to happen after they die. They don't, it's just not true as a matter of descriptive fact that people's actions are only directed at what will preserve their life. It's just not true. And it's not true in a way that to me is so gobsmackingly obvious. I don't understand why anyone would say that, like value, like, hey, you know how you need life to value things? Well, also you can only value things insofar as they serve your life. It sounds like that's what he's saying. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but it does sound like that, and it sounds very strange. One second. Let's take this stuff about rocks back. I got distracted.
life is the standard of value, and that's what this theory is about. I'm surprised there's as much resistance as I'm seeing to this idea, because it really makes sense. And I think several people
Makes sense.
have
How does it
commented
make sense?
in the thread about this, and have realized that it does make sense. But the pushing against this is a bit strange, because you can see that it's life that gives rise to the possibility and need of values. Think about it, something that's not alive, a rock or a can, right, or a book. It just doesn't need anything to remain in existence. It just does stay in existence. Living things need things to stay in existence. They have to go after certain objects that serve their life, and if they don't,
Well, hold up. Like certain objects need to be maintained. Like certain things would deteriorate if they weren't maintained. Is that so? That seems a little strange.
successfully go after and achieve those objects, they simply go out of existence. So that's the significance of this idea of the subjective and the objective and the intrinsic. And I think those are really helpful ways to think about it. So to recap that really quickly, the subjective is in here, detached from reality, so having no correspondence to reality at all. I just believe it because I want to, right? That
Yeah,
kind
did
of
he
thing.
just say, I just believe it
The
because I
intrinsic
want to? Yeah, so I didn't address this point earlier, but conventionally, insofar as subjectivism is understood to reflect a view about the indexing of the truth of claims to the standards of of individuals, this would be something like, if I say something like pizza tastes good, that could be best understood or translated to mean something like, I consider pizza to be delicious. And then if I do consider pizza to be delicious, then my statement pizza is delicious would be true, because it's true that I consider pizza to be delicious. That's I like a very minimalist view of what subjectivism is all about. It's not detached from reality, and it doesn't mean you decide what's the case. So on a standard characterization of subjectivism, it concerns what it is that makes a certain category of statements true. And they're made true by the standards, values, perspective, preferences, like there's different ways you might characterize it, of the individual. So we could say they're made true by the values or preferences or beliefs of the individual. Okay, now that doesn't tell you, and it's not part of the theory, what causes them to have those preferences. Simply, if you say, hey, if you make a statement like pizza is delicious, that statement is made true by whether or not you prefer pizza, because what pizza is delicious means is that you like pizza. You find it to be delicious. And so whether that statement is true depends on whether you in fact find it delicious. So you translate the statement pizza is delicious. We'll just swap it out for the translation. I find pizza delicious. Now, the statement I find pizza delicious is true if I find pizza delicious, and it's false if I don't find pizza delicious. Pretty simple, right? It's like the statement "I am Lance" is true if I am Lance. It's false if I am not Lance, right? So it's the same sort of thing. It's indexed to me. It has that I part of it. Now, I is serving as an index. So when I say I am Lance, there's an explicit index because I'm actually saying I. If I say pizza is delicious, the subjectivist would say there's an implicit indexical element. It's like saying I find pizza to be delicious. And then there's that I, you add that in there, you get that indexical component. It's referring to what I find delicious. And if I do find it delicious, it is delicious. So truth is determined by my standards. That's how I would characterize a typical form of subjectivism. Now, does that mean I choose whether I find pizza delicious? No, I don't know about you. I don't decide what food I like. I find out when I taste it. Like if someone says, "Hey, try this pineapple pizza. You ever had it?" "Oh no, never had pineapple on pizza before." And then I try it, and I liked it, but some people taste it and they go, "Ugh." Do you think those people could just go, you know what? I decided I'm going to like it. So I take another bite. I've decided why don't I just decide that I prefer healthy food, and then I don't know, like chocolate and donuts are disgusting. I hate them. I choose to hate them. Why wouldn't I choose that if I could? I'd be a lot healthier. I wouldn't love to eat super unhealthy things. So this idea that subjective, I don't know why people take that to mean choosing beliefs. Or preferences or values. I don't choose almost that. Like maybe I have some degree of control over some of it, but generally speaking, I don't choose my preferences. And I don't understand why people talk about things in this way. is that people choose by, where the hell are they getting the psychology from? It's really weird. Like, he gives an example of someone saying they choose to believe in God. I don't think people have that much control over their beliefs. I'm not saying they have none. I'm not saying there aren't things that are doxastically manipulable voluntarily, but it's certainly not on a whim. It's certainly not like you just wake up in the morning and you could just swap around your food preferences because you want to, and that's all there is to it. It's not like that.
Intrinsic is the idea that the good and the true and the valuable and et cetera are just out there, completely detached from any consciousness. And in terms, in particular, when we're talking about moral value, a consciousness has to be involved. And so the objective is reserved for the correspondence or the recognition of fact. And I think that can be really helpful as you're thinking through this. Okay, 3. What gives rise to the question of the objectivity or subjectivity of values? What is at stake? This is a little bit similar to what we've already talked about today, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I've already explained objective and subjective, I think, to some extent. But what's at stake? That's an interesting aspect of a question here. So let's talk about that. If it's true that anything I jolly well come up with in my mind is valuable because I say so, right? That's subjective. That's treating value as subjective. And people do that. The murderers who killed a bunch of students at Columbine High School in the 1990s. Dylan Klebold and Harris, I can't remember his last name. They wrote about their position on the world and their consciousness, and they basically said, if we don't like you, then that means you're evil, and we should kill you, and we're going to, right? That kind of thing. And that's precisely what's at stake here, is that if values are subjective, that means anything goes. That means when the jihadists say, well, we close our eyes and just believe that Allah wants us to kill you.
We close our eyes and just believe. Again, he's making it seem like people just choose to believe things, like we just want to believe it, so we do. This is a very strange characterization of how belief works. Why would you characterize it this way? It's so weird.
And then they come to kill you. What are you going to say to them if you agree that it's all just subjective?
You're gonna appeal to your own subjective values. Hey, I don't want you to hurt me. I'm gonna try to stop you from hurting. Like, what are you gonna say if you're a realist? And they're a realist, and they're gonna say, we think it's objectively right to do this, and you would say, I think it's objectively wrong. And they go, well, then you're incorrect, and we're gonna do it. So if you're hey, I don't want you to do this. Well, okay, well, I do want to do this. So what are you gonna do? I don't understand why. What are realists? Do they think they have an advantage when it comes to people that want to do bad things to you? What is the advantage? What do you say as a realist? What do you, hold up. Let me convince you. Are you a realist? Oh, yes, I am. Oh, so let me convince you of what the objective world truths are. Oh, okay, let's sit down and have a cup. The person, like, what do you think you're gonna, like, let's say a person's like gonna rob you in the street corner, and they have a gun pointed at you, and they're like, hand over your wallet, and you're like, hold up now. But technically, that's not stance independently morally permissible. What do you think? Oh shit, I forgot about that. My bad. See you later. Like, what the hell does a realist think they're going to do that an anti-realist couldn't do? Well, it's ridiculous. What? I don't know what they think that but what kind of advantage they think they have dialectically.
And I'm not just arguing pragmatically here, because I'm not saying, well, it's better to have an objective theory because then you can protect yourself from jihadists. That's true.
Whoa, he actually says that that's true. Hold up.
I'm not just arguing pragmatically here, because I'm not saying, well, it's better to have an objective theory because then you can protect yourself from jihadists.
Okay, how? So moral realism provides protection against jihadists. I'm sorry, but are you serious? What protection does it provide? What protection does it provide? I mean, look, this is a Grant Miller says, don't shoot me. That's an objective moral error. Like, how does that protect you? Practically speaking, how does that protect you? I don't know why people think that subjectivists are at a big disadvantage here.
It's true, But it's not the only reason it's good to have an objective theory. It's good to have an objective theory because you want to keep your mind connected to reality so you can succeed in
So,
reality.
okay, so I'm not connected to reality. What does that mean? So I'm a moral anti-realist. I'm a normative anti-realist, but all normativity. Am I not connected to reality? What are the practical implications of that? Seems like I'm navigating through things just fine. Apparently not connected to reality. Maybe being connected to reality is not that important. I'm connected to shmeality. Looks like I get through the world just fine. Just be totally disconnected from reality and being the world of shmeality. Like where is this supposed to have practical implications, and what specifically are they? Like he's making claims here, but I would really want to know what the justification or the argument for these claims is. Yeah, Barney says, I can never understand why so many people think subjective means doesn't matter. Yeah, I give this example a lot. I'm a subjectivist about food for the most part. Like maybe I wouldn't say I'm a subjectivist about the semantics of ordinary gastronomic claims or something. Like I'm not a traditional subjectivist or relativist, but like when I talk about what food I like if I talk about this food is good, that food is good, a lot of times I'm just telling you what I like. There's a sense in which I'm a subjectivist about food. Does that mean it just doesn't matter to me what I eat? Why would that follow? Food preferences, music preferences, just, yeah, unless you think you're a realist about these things, it just doesn't matter. Why would it not matter to you? You have the things you like and you dislike, the things you care about and you don't care about, the things you prefer and disprefer. If those aren't somehow referencing or capturing stance independent normative truths, why would that mean you wouldn't prefer them or wouldn't care about them or wouldn't act on them, or they wouldn't matter? Matter in what sense? They would, I mean, yeah, sure, they wouldn't stance independently matter, but why would that matter to you? Like, why would it stance? Can things only stance dependently matter to you if they stance independently matter? Because that seems very silly. It just, the whole thing just seems really weird. Why realists seem things have to matter independent of you caring about them, or else what? What are they saying? Hey, if this doesn't matter independent of you caring about it, then it wouldn't matter independent of you caring about it. I agree. I still care about it. So I'm going to act on what I care about, not on what matters independent of whether I care about it. I'm going to act on what matters to me, what matters stance dependently. So telling me, yeah, but it doesn't matter stance independently, and I'm just going to use mattering to mean stance independently. Okay, well, then you're just using the word a way I don't give a shit about. Like what? I mean, if I went around saying, hey, food is only tasty no food is tasty because it's only tasty if it stands independently tasty. Because it's not stands independently tasty, no food is tasty. Okay, so let's say we go with gastronomic error theory. That's gastronomic error theory. Okay, so let's say gastronomic error theory is true. And so technically speaking, claims like chocolate cake tastes better than dog shit is technically true. Because what that means is chocolate cake is stands independently tastier than dog shit. Okay, so now does that mean that you should be indifferent between eating food and eating garbage? Would you be indifferent? Like just imagine that it turns out the way ordinary language works, it's just implicitly committed to gastronomic realism. Gastronomic realism is false. And so technically speaking, it's not true that chocolate cake tastes good. Would you go, okay, well, I guess I don't care about eating chocolate cake anymore? Why would you have that reaction? Like I wouldn't have, okay, it still tastes good to me. I don't give a shit about error theory. And if you say, nah, but it doesn't technically taste good. Okay, well, then I could say something like this. I like the taste of it and I want to eat it and I'm going to. See, I'm not saying it tastes good because that's technically false. I don't care. I don't care if it's false. So same thing with moral values. If it's not technically true that, say, stealing is morally wrong, okay, does that mean you don't care whether someone steals from you? No, it's not a logical entailment of that. What you care about and don't care about doesn't logically have to conform with stance independent moral facts. You're not required to comply only with the stance independent facts with respect to how you go about acting on your preferences. You're not required to do that. If you were required by who? Who is imposing that on you? Is it rationality gods are making you, I'm an error theorist, so technically I don't give a shit about anything. That's not an implication. And realists are constantly acting like this is the case. Like you're an insane idiot if you're not a realist. It's so tiresome. It's so ridiculous. It's just so misguided and goofy. It's this weird, like, my way or the highway way of thinking about philosophy. Like if you don't accept all of my metaphysical views, root and branch, then there's nothing. You get nothing. it honestly, it really bothers me because this, I think, if like realists are talking about how obvious all the realist facts are. You know what's obvious? It's obvious that this is a problem, what I'm describing here. So why aren't they all acknowledging this? No, but they don't. They just keep going on with the goofy misframings of anti-realist views. I hit the 2 hour mark. We're gonna have to wrap it up. All right. Let's see if we can finish up this point.
And that is what an objective theory of value and an objective moral code does for you. You want your mind to recognize the facts of reality that give rise to the need and possibility of values. And then, having recognized that, you want to codify that into a principle. Oh, because life is the thing that makes values possible and necessary, that means life is the thing that values are for.
Whoa.
That means life is the standard.
Whoa. Look at that. Let's go back and listen to that one again.
The value principle. Oh, because life is the thing that makes values possible and
let's type it out. Let's type it out. Can someone type this out as he's saying it?
necessary values. And then, having recognized that, you want to codify that into a principle. Oh, because life is the thing that makes values possible.
Because life is the thing that makes values possible.
And necessary. That means.
Did you say and necessary? Something like that.
Life is the thing.
Let's get it
Recognize that. You want to codify that into a principle. Oh, because life is the thing that makes values possible and necessary. That means.
Because life is the thing that makes values possible and necessary, that means.
Life is the thing that values are for.
That means that life is the thing that values are for. Is that what he said? It's late. I'm not capturing everything.
Modify that into a principle. Oh, because life is the thing that makes values possible and necessary. That means life is the thing that values are for.
Yeah, got it.
That means life.
Okay. So he really is making the worst possible mistake I think he could have been making here, which is to say that because life is necessary for value, that therefore value is for life. Okay, water is necessary for life. Therefore, life is about the acquisition of water. Like, just because X is needed for Y, it doesn't mean that Y is needed for X. Like, or Y must be about X. So, maybe, like, I mean, I could give really silly examples. I don't know. You need food to survive, so survival has to be about eating food. Like, it's just because you need one thing for another thing. Like, it doesn't follow that therefore you need that thing to serve the interest of the first thing. Like, okay, here would be an example. I needed my parents to begin to exist in the world. Therefore, that means my whole life should center around service to my parents. Like, that wouldn't follow. Just because. Okay, I've given enough examples. You know what I mean? Here's what he had said. This is such a strange thing to say. Why would someone think this? I don't get it.
Standard of value. And then if we take that idea, that demonstrably true, observationally correct idea.
It's demonstrable. When was it demonstrated? By who? How? It's correct. How does he know this is correct? Is there an argument for this? Like, he just seems to think that, like, as soon as you realize you need life in order to pursue value, that it's obviously value is about pursuing life? Why would things work that way? Why does that follow? What is going on here?
Idea, and use it to develop an integrated system of principles in support of life. What you have there is an objective moral code.
Yeah, like, why would I center my moral system around promoting life? Like, I'm not saying I'm anti-life, but that doesn't mean that's the only thing I care about, or that's what, like, objectively I must comport my values with. Right? Why? I'm sorry, I am flabbergasted by this.
a moral code grounded in reality that serves your life in reality. And this makes morality literally a science, just like any other science. It's a it's a matter of cause and effect, or the law of causality. So, what's at stake here is human life and happiness. And
Where did happiness
there's a sense in which, if you think about it, we regard matters of life and death as the most important matters of all, right? On a common sense level, everybody kind of gets this. If you say, what's, this is a matter of life and death, people are like, oh, okay, well, that means it's really, really important, right?
That's
And
just a turn of phrase. I wouldn't put too much stock in that.
there's in that common sense understanding of that, it's no coincidence that people get that, because it just happens to also be true that life is the standard of value, and it's the standard of value
No.
for the reasons that I've been talking about.
What
But
reasons did
that
he give?
standard
I don't think
corresponds
he gave
to and
reasons.
dovetails with this common sense idea that matters of life and death are the most important matters of all. And I think that may help people to get their head around this a little bit too. So,
All right, I think we'll wrap it up there. I'm just too tired. Had a long day. It's already been 2 hours of this. This was a fun one. I wasn't expecting it to go 2 hours. I thought I was going to get on here for 30 minutes and get frustrated and leave. But let's get a last comment from Jeremy. Anyone else has last comments? Let's get them in here, and then I'm going to go to the outro. All right. Jeremy says, Lance, this is the norm for Randianism and why it has the general reputation it has among philosophers. They don't use words carefully as a feature, not a bug. It's very critical. See more Randian hate. Yeah, it's just Randians. Well, I'm trying my best not to just be a Rand hater just out of the box. So I'm going to evaluate this with trying to hold any particular animus or negative views towards Rand in check, and just evaluate claims on their own terms. And maybe that'll be a useful way to approach this. I'll probably come back to this video and see what else is said in it. But for now, that's going to be it. So I guess I'll say a few things. One is I do have a link. It's a link tree in the description. So that link tree will take you to a page that's got all the other stuff that I'm up to. You could see I got like an academic site on there. I got my blog on there, all the stuff. And I am trying to bump up my count on my blog. So I guess I'll push the blog for now. So go check out my blog. I'm at 425 subscribers now. So I got 1,500 here. I got way more here. I got 4 times as many here as I do over there. So go check out the blog. If you're not that interested in the blog, Substack is quickly becoming a kind of intellectual space for people to talk about stuff through their notes section. It functions a lot like Twitter, but it seems to be a lot less of a cesspool than a lot of Twitter is. I'm not seeing someone post something and then it's 50 responses of memes and stuff that's just totally unrelated. I'm seeing people post stuff about philosophy, science, and then other people engage with them. It's pretty great. So go check out my link tree. You'll see the link to my Substack over there, also called Lance Independent. And you can give me a follow. You can give me a subscription. I do recommend other blogs over there. There's lots of great blogs there. Experimental History is an awesome blog. There's quite a few, and they're growing every day. And it's becoming, like, if you're thinking of starting a blog, I think Substack is a great place to do it. So check the blog out. And all right, anything else people have to say? But yeah, check out the blog. You should talk. So Owen says you should talk to Divinity about this on Discord. Okay, put him in touch with me. I'm happy to do that. All right, I guess that's it. All right, everybody. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here. I didn't do the Lance Loop thing. I got to be like Nathan and get into there's Nathan Nichols, Lance Loop. We got to go with the alliteration. I'm all about alliteration. All right, everybody. Do all the standard stuff. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Leave a comment. I love the comments. I do go through and read the comments. I probably responding to people a little less than I have. I'm real busy lately, which I should talk about that more in a stream, what I'm up to these days. Yeah, I guess that's it. Have a good night, everybody.